Hi guys, Trevor Chiquita here, and today we are going to talk about what are the things that can cause my migraines. What are the difference between triggers versus an actual cause? This is what we call an etiology. Many people don't understand this because there's a whole heap of different things that can cause migraines, there's a whole heap of different things that can trigger them, and they are actually quite different. So many people might have heard stories of things like chocolate or other substances triggering off their migraines, but these are what we call triggers. They're not the cause of migraines, they're triggers to migraines. So what are the different components that actually drive migraines? Well, before we can start talking about that, what we really need to talk about is what is a migraine and how does a migraine work. Because at the end of this, I'm going to give you a couple of key quick tips that you can do to check yourself very, very quickly to see if migraines are an issue. So stay back and wait to the end, and I'll show you all these points that you can do yourself to work out whether these are your issues. But migraine itself, if we understand what migraine is, and we can start understanding why triggers and causes are very, very, very different. So when we start talking about migraine, there's a few key things you need to understand about the neurology of a migraine. So when we look at migraines, there's this area in the top part of your brainstem called your midbrain. And your midbrain basically is an area of your brainstem that is your flight or fight responses. So these are the things that drive your stress patterns, okay? So your midbrain fires up to your brain and increases your arousal rate. So when you're stressed and when you're under attack, you need to be more aware and more alert of everything that's going on around you in order to protect yourself and save your life. So this thing drives your arousal rate to try and keep you alert, stop you from falling asleep as well. So coming into the midbrain here, we have a nerve called your trigeminal nerve, which some of you may know as cranial nerve 5. So trigeminal nerve basically is a nerve that supplies your entire face. So it kind of comes out, looks something like this. We have a branch that comes up over your forehead, a branch that comes across to the face, and a branch that comes down the bottom here as well. And these things basically supply all the sensory mechanisms of the face and supply the ability of your jaw to move as well. So when we start getting problems with the jaw, one of the things that can happen is that the trigeminal can fire in, and the net result is it winds up this area, which therefore increases our arousal rate. The problem with this is this trigeminal nerve also comes up and basically supplies all of the blood vessels in the brain itself. Now what we know is when you get irritation to one side of a nerve, it tends to happen to the other side as well. So if we have an inflammatory response happening here, so it starts swelling, that inflammatory response also happens through this area here. And this releases chemicals into this area around the blood vessel that causes the blood vessel to constrict. As the blood vessel constricts, it reduces blood supply to that area of the brain, and the net result of that reduction in blood supply is that area of the brain doesn't function as well. So this most often happens in the occipital lobe, which is why a lot of people with migraines will start getting visual disturbances, because the occipital lobe is the main area that regulates our visual patterning. The other thing about that as well, just like when you cut your hand or if you bump your knee or something like that, the area around it has all these chemicals secreted to it to sensitize it, to make sure that we don't do any further damage to that area. So the same thing happens with this as well. So this whole area becomes sensitized. When the area becomes sensitized, now the normal beating of the artery, that normal beating like this of the artery, you now start to feel. And this is basically becomes your throbbing headache that goes with migraine as well. So it's changes in the trigeminal pathway, which is believed to be the major trigger for migraines at the moment. Now if we come back to this fellow over here, the midbrain also takes input not only from your jaw, but it also takes input from your eyes and from your ears. So the net result is this fellow gets wound up, we also tend to get sensitivity to light, and we also tend to get sensitivity to sound. So if we understand this, you can start understanding now why most migraines are associated with visual disturbances initially. They're also associated with throbbing headaches, and they're also associated with sensitivities to touch, to light, and to sound as well. So this is the mechanism at the moment, how it's believed that migraines are driven. So what are the things that can influence this? Well, in short, anything that influences this fella here can potentially influence your migraines and trigger them. So what we understand is that there are receptors along your trigeminal nerve for estrogen. So as your estrogen levels come up, if you're female, the net result is that can actually act as a stimulation to the trigeminal nerve and enhance the effect. So we see things cyclically being a problem as well. So a lot of women who get migraines right before their period often have estrogen-based issues changing trigeminal function. We also have coming in from up here your balance centers, which is often referred to as the vestibular system, which is creating an input into this area as well. Then we also have input from your jaw sitting in here, which is driving input to this fella as well. And there are other things to do with oxygenation. So if we have a lack of oxygen in our system, that will drive this area up as well. Our neck, our cervical spine, so necks tend to get tight or changes in motion in the neck will also affect this area as well. Damage to our face. Even sometimes things like surgery and stuff like this can sometimes be issues. Teeth extraction can sometimes be issues as well. So as you can see, there's a lot of different factors that create input into this area as well. The other big comorbidity, or things that influence things that aren't directly related to this, which wind up this entire area, is sleep deprivation. So we know sleep deprivation is another risk factor for all of these things. So what we're really talking about is comorbidities. So each one of these has the potential of influencing this mechanism. However, the more of these things we have happening at the same time, the more likely we are to trigger an event and pop over that threshold, which actually triggers your migraines. So sometimes a lot of these things that we see that are potentially triggers that cause migraines that people associate aren't actually causing the migraine. What they're doing is just increasing and just overloading these areas and making big problems for people. So what can we do about it? How can we test some of these things? So vestibular is closely associated with balance. So we can check this very easily by standing on some foam, so on a pillow, closing your eyes and looking for the first initial movement. If we keep moving in the same direction with the eyes closed, that can potentially be a problem with it. The jaw really needs someone specialised and trained in that area to work it out. But generally, if you've got clicking, you've got popping, you've got pain in your jaw, that's already some key signs that, hey, you need to have this further looked at. Sleep is pretty easy. Sleep deprivation, there's a few key things for sleep deprivation. So the first one is if you're waking up because of your alarm, there's a chance that you're sleep deprived. You should be waking up to your alarm, not because of your alarm. Sleep is all about sleep cycles as well. So interrupted, broken sleep means we're often not getting into what we call REM, and this can actually lead to sleep deprivation type symptoms as well. Oxygen stats. Oxygen, we can see little things like purple fingernails or blue fingernails, blue lips, things like this. But pulse oximeters, you can get a pulse oximeter online from eBay. It'll cost you about $15, $20. A little light that goes over your finger. A lot of your phones now carry them. I think the new Samsungs are carrying that type of stuff, and you can just use the health programs in Samsung Health to actually work out your blood oxygen stats as well with that. Hormonally, well, you can work out a lot of your hormones just by asking questions about your cycles. Are you 28 days? Are you shorter? Are you longer? Are you heavier with your flows? Lighter with your flows? These are all things that kind of influence all this stuff. And our light and sound sensitivity, well, if you're suffering with problems with the glare hurting your eyes, or if you're finding that you get into noisy rooms, echoey restaurants, screaming kids, and they just tend to frustrate you, these can be potential warning signs with this stuff as well. So here's a whole heap of different things to give you some basic understanding on how the mechanisms of migraines can be triggered, and why, you know, just because you're having a reaction when you have some chocolate doesn't mean chocolate is actually causing your migraines. Okay, they can just be triggers. But if you have any questions, just pop them down below.